So I guess I can introduce myself a little bit. I teach in the School of Architecture. I've been here for 12 years or so. And for the last couple of years, I've coordinated our first year kind of representation sequence, which is a little bit more geometry heavy, though is, I think, a very contemplative practice because it requires just an intense amount of attention and actual practice to get good at it. You can see in the background maybe of my video, I don't know which side it's on for you, but over there. That's my drafting board where I do tutorials for them, and it's all like very mechanical and kind of geometric processes to represent physical objects in 2D space. But we also pair that with a lot of sketching assignments that are much more open. They kind of relate to what they're learning in terms of the content, but from a how you do it sort of way, they're not graded. They're just like go spend 15 minutes, come up with a couple of pages in your sketchbook and have a good time. And the students seem to really like those, even though it's a little extra work on like a Saturday morning. And one of my favorites there is to always get them on the first day or two to do some blind contour type sketches of each other to get to know each other and themselves, especially with younger, like first year high school students. And I think that's a really good one for introducing kind of an attention or a mindfulness because it requires you to not think about what you're drawing a little bit more and to just let it go, let your hand go. And then that unminding helps me come back to minding it a little bit more clearly. So that might be a fun thing to start with. And I was really curious in beginning these sessions how that would work in Zoom. I like to do blind contours of people's faces because it's impossible not to laugh and giggle, and then they kind of break the ice and get comfortable with each other. So what I've set up is that I can have an overhead camera just for general seeing what's going on purposes. And I think as time develops, might sometimes ask students to aim their camera at their paper if they want, or just watch the drawing. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But then I'm moving my Zoom window into where I can see it. I'm just gonna try to kind of look at the window and follow some curves and see what I discover there. Well, brought out a bunch of different things, common pencils, pens. I like this one. It's a drafting pencil, but with a really heavy lead, so it's not accurate at all, so you don't have to feel bad when things look messy. I also like to do it, I'm right-handed, but like to do it with my left hand to give myself a little more disconnection from that, trying to control, and more openness to just what are the muscles and the eyes doing together. And I think that's the thing I like about this exercise, and I use it a lot during meetings when I need to unthink a little to focus. So what I would suggest is anything in your vision that's preferably away from a piece of paper even. So this is going to be kind of fun and weird. Could be your hand, could be someone's face on the Zoom window, could be the window or something like that. And just picking a place on it, anywhere that's a starting point, and really fixing that and trying to get in of where is that point? And put the pencil to the page, and those are the same point. And then begin slowly tracking the eyes along the edge of wherever that point is, and trying to move the pencil at the same time. So it's pretty slow. And sometimes the curves get a little faster. Maybe they're straight for a little while. Sometimes they have a kink or an elbow, and we have to pick up our motion. And just tracking the eyes at the same speed as the pencil. And it gets a little faster as time goes on. Sometimes you have something that's a nice organic swoop that's a little easier to track, then something that gets a little harder. I try to see details, but just as the edge of something, so not worry what they represent or what they are. And then sometimes you pick a path that ends strange, and I've kind of reached the edge of something on the screen. I try not to pick up my pencil so much and just say, how do we get back somewhere? So sometimes you just take any path you want and say, is that somewhere near where it might be? And just start again. And as we track with our eyes and track with our hands, things get a little bit more fluid. Maybe over time they get more accurate, but maybe not. And it's not super important with this type of drawing. It's just that attention to the edge and the contour, which is the connection to the hand. Finding, for me, like a lot of interest in curves and how geometry works. Oops. And then stepping back for a second and seeing, what I end up with. And I like those as like a quick shake out the exercise. I think when you do them, especially with your offhand, which maybe is not the best way to start all the time, but it really triggers a lot of new things inside my brain. I used to do also writing exercises where I just like do my journal or write a sentence over and over again with the left hand, and it gets like new stuff going because you're not used to using it. And that's a nice attention thing to bring to attention. Maybe I'll try a couple of those. I might move back here, try one with my right hand, finding a new place on the page, and choosing something new. A few little fun objects on my desk. See if I can bring some of them into focus. Another thing I've been interested in recently is how do I connect my breath to the movement of my fingers? I think it's something I haven't ever really paid attention to in this type of drawing or in drawing in general. And building off of like a yoga practice, thinking about that connection of breath to movement and what that might mean for drawing. It's a little off, but it's okay. There's a little a bear that I got at a mesa in New Mexico that I like to keep on my desk that has nice drawings on it, carvings into it. So those are one of the exercises I think are good warm-ups. I am a endless doodler when it comes to conversation and listening, especially phone calls or even the Zoom calls we spend our time on, or in meetings. I used to gauge in school if it was a interesting or successful class that I took by how densely my page was indecipherable from doodles rather than the notes I was taking. Because I don't know, my mother always did it too, and it's just something in our brains that keep our mind engaged in what's going on. And I've always wondered if there's some kind of secret key in there to what's really happening, but I don't think so. They're mostly just like the same weird shapes over and over. Probably what I see when you press on your eyeballs or something like that. But that's another, now that hands are warmed up, another exercise I like to do. And for many years off and on, we'll do a practice where I just keep a little sketchbook by my bed and just spend like 10 minutes or 15 minutes seeing where the pen goes. So it's similar to the blind contour in that it's just about building curves on top of curves or shapes on top of shapes, and trying to let them emerge or organically develop. So for me, that often starts with the hard part, which is beginning, just picking somewhere, making some mark. I have a friend I've always thought had the most interesting tattoo across her collarbone, which is just like amorphous. It's like a series of 5 dots or so. And she told me this story of one time that she went to the tattoo place and just wanted something, and then took a Sharpie and drew 5 dots, and then they just tattooed the 5 Sharpie dots in that place, and that was it. It felt very organic. I make some dots, and then I want to choose a base to draw a curve or a line. From that language of the line, got a little bit of an S. You can draw a few more. Start building them together with the shapes. Some of this we explore in our first year curriculum, where we used to really, several years ago, in terms of developing an awareness of what a rule-based drawing was. They can have some consistency to its language. So like identifying elements of shape or tone, texture, curve, and then using them repeatedly in a semi-consistent fashion to fill the space of a page, but also being conscious and paying attention to whether or not you start to break or adapt those rules. Sometimes to just start to fill space and see how they inform composition. And then when things don't make sense with the rest of it, draw something new. The page. And after I have enough lines to start to identify areas or regions, something I find myself doing quite a lot. I like to think about a question as coming in and defining more enclosed areas that allow me to bring tone or value to that. My college art professor would be very upset with my wrist movement right now. It's something I know I've never taken the time to get out of the habit of doing this instead of doing this. Even though in architectural drawing, like you basically are a machine and you just move your arm like this and your wrist kind of stays almost lightly tensioned so that you can just keep the pressure on the pencil. And I'm discovered that one of the hardest things to introduce to our first year students, as we still start with a very analog way of working, is that non-sketch but mechanical feel that still has a high degree of subtlety as we talk about like either just letting the weight of the pencil or pen on the page, in this case it's almost not touching at all, to trying to break habits of like pushing to make something show up, which can tear the paper or destroy your pencil or your pen. Finding something in the middle that's like the weight of your hand and the weight of the pencil together without any real pressure, until every time the line has a pretty consistent feel. It's a little more of a pencil technique. Pens tend to be a little more consistent in general. And then there's the fun side we bring to them, just a pencil, turning the pencil while you draw so the tip stays relatively consistent and sharp. And that's much easier on a drafting board or in like smooth and full deliberate strokes. It's very hard, a little sketchy with. But once I get enough marks, I tend to find that's like the place where I can really begin to explore and connect new things. and see what comes up. Cool. The sun is coming out now. The clouds are passing away. I'm losing my lighting. Let's see if we can bring that back into focus a little. This is one thing I've learned a lot about in the last year of teaching online is how to use streaming software made for people who live stream or video game or do stuff on YouTube, to mix multiple cameras and mediums together so I can be showing students things on the screen like kind of behind my head in this like weird little floating head format at the same time as talking about it, so I don't have to like take over the whole conversation. It tends to be a little less detailed, like can't really see through the compression of the video like all the fine details, but for general like location of something or pointing out something they can follow along with, or just having an example that's live, I find it very helpful. We've had a lot of fun with some high school students. They're very shy, they don't want to be on camera at all. And they've been on camera all day for school, and they come to these after school programs and they're just kind of like tired. It's almost dinner time and we never really know if they're there or not, but they do respond now and then. We ask them questions and they show us work at the end of the day and we're like, oh wow, you did something. But the most fun I think they had and we had is we'd start new tasks like this, like drawing or making a model of something, and ask them to just aim the camera like at it. So like aim the laptop down, they can't see the screen. There's nothing to see anyway because they're not on camera. And suddenly they're like, well, I'm really afraid to like draw that first line, or I'm really worried I'm going to make a bad cut. And then you'll find one slightly braver student and be like, how about you just pull the knife through there? And they do it and it's fine. Everything looks, it's good. And every other student's like, oh wow, okay. And then they all start, and then they start like, they forget the camera's on, they're just making stuff. And a couple hours go by, and then it's amazing how much they produce. But it's helped a lot to get over that, of being able to share the environments a little more. Bring myself back big again for a second. Today I'm just trying out a few different techniques that I think might work for this. One thing I'm curious about, and I'm not sure it's the best suggestion to make to everybody, it depends on your setup, but we've encountered a lot of students that maybe they don't have a printer at home or some of the fabrication tools, but we're working with ways of making that build something in the computer and then have a translation mechanism out to paper, to flat sheets of material that can be, say, folded up. And they're kind of like stumped because they have no way to get it out. It's trapped inside the computer. And we want them to kind of build up ingenuity in that realm. And we're like, well, you can always put it on the screen and just like take that piece of paper and put it on the screen and just trace it to that piece of paper loosely, or just hit the corners or something and then connect the dots down below. So that's something I thought about. Could be kind of fun, is just to pull up an image that you find interesting, like Google image search for a flower. I like to draw flowers or photograph flowers or other things, and use it as a starting point. I've done a lot of my own personal design interest and research is into starting from natural or organic forms to learn curves, because they come from a physical environment, so they tend to have a lot of like built-in physics to them, a lot of weight, a lot of surface tension. And so those curves, it's not important to me what they make, except that I find it visually interesting. I like the curve, but it is important that they reflect how something developed in a physical environment, because that then translates often to something that can be built and still have some degree of resistance to gravity and stuff like that. And obviously scales do change things, but it kind of works. So that's something I like. Or peppers. I like to draw vegetables, peppers. So it's one thing I would like to try because I've actually never done it. I just pulled up an image of a flower on my screen. You could also just pull an image of a flower or any object up in your mind and draw. But I want to see what happens if I just take some notebook paper. It's not going to work for me. Doing that right now. Some vellum. I can see just a bit through there and think about what might be. If I can, I'll do this so it's like more demonstrative and see something. And I like to always, with these drawing things, encourage students to do stuff like hold your pencil like this, like a paintbrush, because it's a lot harder to draw, and then you won't worry so much about what you're drawing. I'm just following the edges, learning the curves. Just to get something to start. We do a lot of tracing in architecture from the point of view of like using transparent paper to constantly do revisions or iterations of drawings, because you don't start over each time when they're quite dense and kind of drawings for professional use. So I'm used to that as part of my way of thinking about drawing and getting like a baseline. Not the most interesting flower for me, it just showed up on my screen, but it does give me a place to begin to think about some of the curves and this like wiggly, a little bit folded edge. It's my eye watches how my pen tracks that edge, similar to the blind contour, but unblind, I suppose, with the drawing. Record into my mind a little bit of how that curve works, how that material stretches and relaxes around the edge of the plants. The rules break a little bit because one petal always has to be on top somewhere or got blown by the wind. Then I have a skeleton framework, start making up new things. Completing the parts that I couldn't see through the page or didn't picture in my mind with whatever I think they should be. And as the picture resolves, get a little faster, run into an edge, think about the contrast between things, contrast in lines or in tone. Then take them somewhere else, build off the curve. Doesn't have to be the subject anymore. Find myself drawing a lot of contours. Maybe it's just that practice or interest in the curve and a way to make things have some degree of depth or three-dimensionality. Remembering to breathe. I hope as we get near the 9:30 mark, I guess that's they're half an hour that's listed on the thing. Um, hope our hands are feeling a little bit warmer, maybe our fingers a little bit more limber, and hopefully a little activated there in the spatial part of the brain. So I like about it. Um, but this was fun for me the first time. A little maybe jumping around, but I wanted to test out a few and see how they feel to me on camera. I am still not used to this. I'm much more used to the in-person interaction, and the limit of reading the room is very strange and very challenging. Easy to disappear into yourself, I think. Bye. Have a good Wednesday.